Look, I think I can safely say there was this illusion, and I can say that because I was part of that group that assumed this was not a realistic thing that would happen, at least in the way that it did. Everyone was looking at this and questioning. I would question myself as well. What on earth does it even mean to close the Strait of Hormuz?
So it looks like the Strait of Hormuz, yes, it's Hormuz, not Hormuz, is still closed. LNG and gas and oil shipments, as well as other critical minerals and other critical products, are still stuck in the Persian Gulf. This is going to have a massive ripple effect on the global economy. I'm Borzu Daragahi. This is my podcast. It's called Badlands. You can subscribe. It's at Borzu, BORZOU.substack.com. I'm here today with Nader Itayim. He is an energy and commodities analyst at Argus, which is a big-time news and information service for people in the industry. He joins us from where? Where are you today, Nader?
I'm in Poland.
Oh, wow, great. Weren't you in the Gulf at some point?
I was in the Gulf, but it's been a couple of weeks now. We came to Poland just for, let's say, a bit of quiet time.
So I guess I just want to ask you, what is the state of play at this point? Hormuz is closed. Like, don't listen to Donald Trump's social media posts. What does that mean? And if you could just give an overview of the situation in the Gulf in terms of the tracking of ships and so on, which is, I'm sure, something that energy analysts are doing right now, watching these little blips on the map move. What do you see?
No, for sure. So first off, thank you for inviting me. It's really wonderful to be on. I mean, if we're going to try and take a macro look at this, yeah, you mentioned that this is not only an oil issue, it's not only a gas issue. This is oil, gas, LNG, this is oil products, this is fertilizers. So across the board, the global economy is being hit. It has been hit. I mean, we're now 6 weeks, almost seven into this war. I mean, I'm gonna, if I may, I will focus on the oil first. Obviously, the biggest shock I think was in oil and gas. Starting with oil, there was a huge, because of what happened in the Strait, because of the fact that the Strait was essentially, we don't want to say closed totally because it was never totally closed, but I mean, it's pretty much, for all intents and purposes, really, really, the flows have been disrupted. So there has been the odd ship coming out, but for the most part, those have only been Iranian vessels or vessels carrying Iranian oil. So as for everyone else, what really happened was you have about 6 or 7 countries that hug the Persian Gulf. All of those countries essentially had to shut in their production at some point, bar 2 countries. That would be Saudi Arabia and the UAE. Why? Those countries, basically, these are the only 2 countries which have alternative routes to actually send their oil a different route. So Saudi Arabia has this incredible 7 million barrel per day pipeline. It's known as the East-West pipeline. That has allowed it to maybe shift maybe 75% of what it would typically export from the Strait of Hormuz over across the country, and allows it to actually get its crude out either from Bab el-Mandeb or north through the Suez Canal. The UAE has something which is a little bit, it's less dramatic, but that's about a 1 million barrel per day, 1.5 million barrel per day pipeline that allows it to export out from just outside the Strait of Hormuz. Okay, this is the ADCOP pipeline from Habshan to Fujairah. Now, all the other countries have basically had to reduce their production to basically just enough to basically cover their own internal production, right? Their internal demand, excuse me. That's for oil products and things like that. So production has collapsed. Exports out of the region have pretty much collapsed. And we're at a point now where the world is basically trying to figure out, how do we get past this? Over the past 4 or 5 weeks, the impact, we've seen it in the oil price, right? But you're not really seeing the full impact of the losses because essentially the world, it takes time for sort of supply chains to really feel the impact. And over the last 2 or 3 weeks in particular, you have seen governments come out with different kind of initiatives to try and at least temper the impact on the economy, right? So if this continues for much longer, that's really when we're going to see the impact kick in. So this has been the stress and the worry, and this is what everyone's been warning for some time now.
You mentioned that crucial pipeline, the Saudi pipeline. Didn't it get hit? Didn't I see a report that it got hit and perhaps shut down
Right.
temporarily?
Right. So this has been one of the major worries here, that yes, there are alternative routes for this crude, but what happens if they get hit? Iran has shown it's able to, hit targets across the region. So you're right. This was a couple of days ago. I think crucially, this seems to have happened after the ceasefire announcement. Okay, we started hearing reports of that a couple of days ago that the pipeline was hit. So the actual pipeline is deep underground. This is
Uh-huh.
something to say. What was hit is what is known as pumping stations. So all of these pipelines have pumping stations along the pipeline, which will essentially push this crude through. So when one of the pumping stations get hit, naturally it's going to impact flow. So what we heard yesterday from the Saudi Energy Ministry essentially is that one pumping station was damaged, and the impact here was 700,000 barrel per day of flow. So
Hmm.
what we've been seeing over the last month is, I mean, they say nameplate capacity of this pipeline is 7 million barrels. That's massive. And so if you assume, and they've been saying they've been pushing the maximum crude through there, most of that for export, but some of that for domestic use, we're losing about 10, they said 700,000 barrels per day. So that's about 10, 12% of what was going through there. So that's big. So they lost, I mean, Iran has shown, or whoever it was that actually hit this pipeline, that it's good to have alternatives, but even those alternatives are at risk.
What do you see about in terms of LNG? I mean, thankfully, at least for half of the world, winter is coming to a close, so there's not as much
Yeah.
need and demand as there were. Although it's been pretty cold in parts of Northern Europe and so on. But what do you think? Is that also going to is the spring weather going to help out with that? The impact of that? Do you think?
So look, the fact that the Western Hemisphere is going through spring now or better weather, it's definitely going to help to an extent. But if we're looking at LNG, obviously the biggest impact in LNG was seen in Qatar. It was seen at Ras Laffan, which is essentially where Qatar Energy's LNG facilities are. They're all in this massive complex. This was hit. I think 17% was the figure that they gave. 70% of Qatar's, production was damaged, or at least facilities that produce were damaged. But as of now, they're not producing. There's force majeure because they cannot get any LNG out.
Yeah.
So the countries that are mainly hit here are not actually those that are, going to be experiencing the better, weather, so to speak. It's Asia Pacific. And this is really why we've been seeing, interestingly, if you notice who has been making, those diplomatic outreach to Iran in
Yeah.
recent weeks to try and see, can you help us get some, energy out of the Gulf? It's been those countries, or at least some of those countries in Asia Pacific. That's what Malaysia, Thailand, Philippines. These are countries that really are desperate for this energy, and these are the countries that we've seen hearing, about the government essentially coming out with all kinds of initiatives to try and basically reduce demand in the country to help tide them over during this period.
And what about Russia? Can't Russia alleviate some of that demand at this point? Even though it's under sanctions, apparently Trump has lifted some of those or eased some of the sanctions at least. Could this benefit Russia? And could it at least help with, okay, not with supply necessarily because there's so many restrictions, but how about in terms of pricing?
So it absolutely will help. And as you mentioned, yes, Trump came out a few weeks ago and surprised, I don't know if it surprised everybody, but he came out and said, okay, we're having issues with crude. Here, Putin, you're going to go and benefit from this. Suddenly, sanctions are lifted and temporarily. In theory, yes, that'll open up new markets or new customers who were maybe probably unwilling to buy from Russia before, thinking, okay, here's an option for us. Yes, suddenly Russia, as well as Iran, for some time now, has been offering its crude in particular at huge discounts. In a situation like this, suddenly Russia's in a position where it doesn't actually have to be offering such massive discounts. So again, win-win for them. Obviously, Europe is in a situation where even at the worst of times recently, they've been coming out, at least the rhetoric is, we do not want to be dependent on Russia. And even now, we don't want to fall back into that, familiar place that we were in for several years ago. As of now, they're managing, but obviously, if this is prolonged, then when needs must, at some point they're going to have to do that, and Russia obviously is going to try and play hardball because it can.
It's a side note, and I don't want to forget it, so I'll bring it up. Yeah, I saw an
Sure.
announcement today from Total Energies, and they were saying that
Mm.
yeah, we have all these big production problems. We got hit. We got a Saudi Aramco refinery was hit. It's out of commission for now, et cetera, et cetera. And they were listing all their problems and all the issues they have, but they're still going to make a bonanza this year because the rising, and they've worded it quite explicitly, the rising oil prices will make up for any production shortfall, more than make up for any production shortfall. Are energy companies just making a lot of money off of this crisis?
I mean, let's not beat around the bush. Obviously, in times of crisis, when prices go up, these companies are going to make some kind of a killing. I mean, but ultimately, these are also the companies that are going to have to be there to deliver that energy down the line. So this is what I always try to say. You have to find that sweet spot, which is an acceptable price where you don't destroy demand, but at the same time, prices have to be at a level which allow these companies to actually produce what the world needs. So I think something you've been hearing about, particularly out of the Gulf where I'm typically based, is you need to invest because, several years down the line, decades down the line, there are many people that think or believe that, when it comes to hydrocarbons, demand is just going to fall and fall and fall and fall to a point that it won't be needed. But there are many around where, I mean, I think it's okay to say more realistic to think, look, hydrocarbons, absolutely. Let's go and try and work on reducing demand for hydrocarbons and bring in alternatives. But ultimately, that's still the base load. And every other year, we seem to be entering a new crisis where the most important thing for every household, every family is affordability, right? So the most affordable energy is and has been and likely will be for at least the next couple of decades, hydrocarbons. So I think the message has been let's try and work together towards that. And companies like Total are gonna be there. And to Total's credit, I have to say, I mean, their kind of alternative energy kind of program is also quite strong, particularly in the Middle East. They're doing their best to get there, but obviously the fact is, hydrocarbons are going to be the main part of the business for some time to come.
Yeah, and I think it's also important to note that it's hard to enjoy your wealth as an executive of one of these companies if the entire country where you live in is coming at you with pitchforks. And that's something
Absolutely.
to think about as well. If you're a CEO at one of these companies, there is the issue of political stability. And let's talk about that a little bit, if we may. We talk
Sure.
about demand destruction. It's a very kind of clinical economic term, but what it really means is that people become so poor that they just change their lifestyles, change their consumption habits,
Right.
and that creates
Right.
a lot, people basically falling out of the middle class. And that is an issue in Asia and so on. Could you talk about that a little bit? Is that something that you as an energy analyst look at, is like these macroeconomic issues in these developing countries, Indonesia, Philippines, Thailand, energy hungry, yet still kind of in precarious economic situations?
I mean, I can talk about it in at a holistic level. I typically would focus on the Gulf here and the Middle East, but this idea of demand destruction, this is something that we, as someone who follows, developments in the region, but broadly, I follow OPEC as well. This is a massive issue when it comes to, developing policy for these producers. As I said before, the idea here is to keep prices at a level where demand destruction simply does not happen because ultimately it's going to hurt producers in the long run. And this is something they try to stress anytime anyone does come at them with those pitchforks, because always I mean, as an OPEC watcher, I know prices go up and everyone takes out the pitchforks for OPEC. This is the kind of conversation that's been constantly had. And when it comes to demand destruction, be it in Southeast or anywhere really, this is not a place where anyone wants to be. You need that economic growth, and you need this to especially after the years that we've had, be it COVID and after that the Russia-Ukraine war. It's just one hit after the next. So at this point, I think we need to have some kind of affordable energy to help drive these economies and just pull them out of this kind of lull that they've been in for the last few years into a new norm. But then again, as I said, crisis after crisis, who knows what's around the corner?
Let's talk about other supply chains. You mentioned fertilizer, i.e., the urea that is produced in the Persian Gulf region. What about that? Is that a danger right now, or do countries have sufficient stockpiles of fertilizer to get them through at least this planting season, or will supply chains be disrupted no matter what?
I think supply chains are going to be disrupted. Look, whether it be fertilizer or any other commodity, ultimately stocks are limited throughout. No one has prepared for, people prepare and have, let's say stocks for, I don't know, 1 month, 2 months, 3 months, but no one really prepares for a crisis of this magnitude until it happens. So I think what we might see, be it in fertilizer or other commodities, what we might see after this is all over is suddenly people or countries, governments essentially deciding, you know what, I think we need to rethink what we're doing here. So for producers, it'll be about trying to find yet more alternatives of getting their oil out beyond Strait of Hormuz. And for consumers, essentially building, having the ability to build even further stocks and more stocks than they have already because hey, we just went through something we don't want to experience again. The only country when it comes to particularly oil, Chinese. The Chinese have been building stocks for a year plus, a year and a half maybe. They have incredible stocks at this point, and yet even they, I think, several months down the line, could even start, getting it, reaching some kind of trouble point. So I think this has been a wake-up call for the world in its entirety. And this is the thing. I think we just have to wait and watch and see where we go.
And with regard to the issue of helium and its importance to the supply chain of making microchips, I see that what's moving the stock market is these tech companies and AI
Yeah.
and all the hype around AI and so on. Could this have a really bad knock-on effect on equities markets and this AI bubble that's already kind of overinflated and due for a correction? What do you think? I know it's a little bit outside of your lane.
It is a bit, but the thing is, we're talking about Qatar Energy. I mean, Qatar is where most of this helium has been coming from. And the fact is, until things, I get asked this question a lot of it, even if tomorrow things clear up and there's a ceasefire and everything is clear and how long will it take for things to go back to normal? It is going to take a time. It's not going to take days or weeks. It's going to take months. So I think helium, like all other commodities, by the time we get to a point where we can actually get these supply chains moving in the way that they were moving before, when we're able to get these volumes from where they are today to where they should have been, and these vessels would have been moving these commodities from A to B and back, it's going to be months until we get there. Qatar Energy in particular has actually sustained huge damage, which they've said could take, a matter of years to actually rebuild. So I think, I mean, we talked about damage throughout this period, throughout the region. It's also important to establish how bad that damage was, how serious it was. A lot of the damage that we saw, I don't want to say superficial, but it's something you can repair. But when it comes to Qatar Energy, those are serious hits to the GTL plant, to the LNG producing facilities, helium as well, all of it. So it's definitely one to watch for AI and the chips for sure.
Let me ask you something again, a little bit outside of your lane. I mean,
You're
Iran
testing
has
me
been
today.
threatening that it would close the Strait of Hormuz if it were ever
Mm,
attacked.
yeah.
For decades, as long as I could remember, I remember when, talking to U.S. Military people and think tank people over the years, many years I've been covering the region, they've all said that this is an option that Iran could take and would take, and this is one of the
Mm,
reasons why it's a bad idea to, make a full frontal attack against Iran. Um, Yet, and the Gulfies knew this too, right? I mean, the Gulf
yeah.
leadership knew this too. Um, why was this not taken into account? Why do you think that there was this illusion that this war could happen without the Iranians responding in the way that they've been saying that they're going to respond for so long?
Look, I think I can safely say there was this illusion, and I can say that because I was part of that group that assumed this was not a realistic thing that would happen, at least in the way that it did. We have been talking about this, and Iran has been threatening, as you said, for years, right? Every time there's been any political flare-up in the region, Iran has thrown this card out. You've had MPs, all these MPs coming out one by one and saying, "Oh, it's about to happen." And every time they did, the news would latch onto it and throw it out there as, the leader, the supreme leader has said it. Every Tom, Dick, and Harry in Iran who would throw this out, the world was watching and listening. The thing is, when we would look at this, everyone was looking at this and questioning. I would question myself as well. What on earth does it even mean to close the Strait of Hormuz? Does it mean physically closing the Strait of Hormuz? Does it mean mining the Strait of Hormuz? Does it mean what we're seeing today, basically lobbing rockets and drones at moving targets? So no one really was aware, first of all, what that would even mean. And second of all, a lot of people were the argument was, if Iran closes the Strait of Hormuz, it would be shooting itself in the foot as well, because it also needs this waterway to
Mhm.
export its crude, and it has its allies like China will also be hit if Iran were to do this. But I think what people were not questioning or not taking into consideration is we're talking about Iran under normal circumstances, where I think most people would say that Iran, the Islamic Republic, it's not typically we don't consider it with crazy moves. This is a logical actor. It has been for years. So, but in a situation like this, where the Iranians have, many of them have called this an existential threat, an existential war.
Well, I
This we've
think
seen a side of
Trump,
Iran.
Trump and Netanyahu also said that it was a regime change conflict at the beginning.
Sure,
They
sure,
literally said it was an
absolutely.
existential. This was the end of the
Sure, sure.
Islamic
I
Republic.
wasn't
Yeah,
absolutely. I
yeah,
wasn't suggesting it wasn't. But my point is,
yeah.
in Tehran, when Tehran itself believes that to be the case, they're going to act in ways that maybe they wouldn't under more normal circumstances. So this was the nuclear option. And the thing is, what we were seeing from the Houthis as well for the last few years, they kind of went through this, I guess, a test run, in terms of what it would look like
Wow.
to try and disrupt flows through a waterway, similar waterway. And obviously, there's that relationship between Tehran and the Houthis. So in a way, we were seeing kind of a small, a lab experiment, kind of what was happening over the maybe last few years when it came to Houthis. And then Iran, it showed that, you know what, we've been threatening this for years. Maybe no one believed you would do it. Here we are. And although Tehran continues to say it's not closed, it's only to enemies, so such and so on and so forth, in all effects, it is closed to 95% of ship owners and countries out there, unless have permits, which as we can see, the ceasefire has happened, and in theory, Iran is supposed to open the Strait, but we're not seeing that much change really over the last couple of days. In actuality, it's actually gone down.
And I thought it was also kind of interesting that I don't think people calculated that Iran could close the strait, but not shoot itself in the foot by allowing its own
Mm,
oil to pass through. I think that was
absolutely.
a
Yeah.
calculation that was like a little bit far-fetched as well.
No, no, 100%. This is the thing. This has been a wake-up call for many different countries, for many analysts, for many in the community, just to see, you know what, we were wrong. And I think many people have been accepting that. And it's a learning experience for most people. And this is what's most interesting about where we go from here. Because Iran itself may have been surprised at how well they've been able to do this. Because in actuality, they're 6 months into this against two of the strongest, if not the strongest militaries on earth. They're holding their own. And when it comes to the Strait of Hormuz, I don't think their stranglehold on it has ever been more evident than it is today. This is why we're seeing, all the conversation within Iran itself is basically, if they're shutting out the noise, they have plans for the strait and how they plan to, deal with this strait for years. Obviously, is that going to happen several months down the line? Probably not. But it's interesting to just hear and see what they're talking about in Tehran itself.
You lived in the Gulf. You usually live in the Gulf. Do you think and there's a lot of talk right now about reopening the Strait of Hormuz militarily and Trump trying to gather together an international armada to go and reopen the strait by force.
Right.
A lot of analysts are saying that's not even possible. Like really smart people, military people, including, people who were in the US military, who were on
Yeah.
like gunships during the Iran-Iraq war in the US in the Persian Gulf, saying it's not really possible to open it up in that way. What do you think? What do you say? Is there a way of militarily neutralizing Iran in that area to allow ships to come back and forth?
Not before you go and degrade even more of Iran's, launching capacity and capability. And I mean, like I said, six, almost 7 weeks in, there's been a lot of destruction in Iran. And to this day, Iran is still managing to launch all kinds of projectiles across the region. So this is the thing. If this was an operation that was easily, maybe not easily, but straightforward in a way, difficult but straightforward, they would have done so by now. I think there's an understanding even in the military community in the US, this is simply not something we can do. And although a president like Donald Trump would like to come out and say with this bluster and say we can do everything, we have the best military on earth, such and such, that may be true, but everyone has their limitations. And Iran has figured out a way in which to basically trap and have this chokehold on this strait. That's why essentially this need for diplomacy really has never been greater than it is today for the global economy's sake. And I think this is also a realization that Washington has been waking up to, that something needs to be done here. This cannot keep going on forever. And at some point, Iran will have to not acquiesce, far from it. But the point is, I don't think even Iran is interested in this going on forever. So possibly we're at a point where, the US can look at this, and or at least Trump can look at this and maybe point to a few things and say, I achieved what I set out to do, even if it may not be the case. If you say something enough times, it becomes real, I guess, for some
Yeah.
people. And in Iran itself, they have managed to resist this long. And who knows if they come out of this, with some kind of formal or at least understanding and acceptance from the wider, community that, the Strait of Hormuz is under our control. Potentially, they come out strategically stronger than they went into this. So it's a very interesting case study. This whole period.
What do you think of the idea of making permanent the notion that Iran, perhaps in partnership with Oman, could start charging tolls? And as apparently an Omani diplomat was suggesting, use that money to help rebuild from the damage of the war. Do you think that's doable? Is that a non-starter, or is that not possible?
I mean, look, so what you just described now, so there's actually a bill. I don't know if you've been following, but there's a bill that has been passed around Parliament in Iran over the last
Yeah.
few weeks, which essentially says this, that I was reporting on it yesterday. Essentially, they have a situation where they want to create some kind of a fund. Iran says that it'll control the Strait. They don't explicitly mention Oman, but they say that we will open a fund, we will continue to take tolls, and the money will not go to the Iranian state, but go towards this fund. Who will be part of this fund? Regional countries can apply. Okay, so this is Iran kind of saying that,
Yeah.
we're still the gatekeepers here. You can apply, you can be part of this group, and then we can all, as a community, use the funds towards reparations for all of us. Now, it's interesting. The responses I've been getting to people reading my article have been really interesting because they're across the board. Okay. I think those who are outside the Gulf are more interested in as a experiment, going, this is actually quite interesting. I didn't think of it this way. Maybe, the Iranians are being quite, crafty with the way they're trying to deal with this, try to bring more stakeholders into this. Maybe why not? But the truth is, within the Gulf, I do not see an appetite among most. I don't want to say all, because I think this period, like many periods before, it showed that although the Gulf GCC can be united, and they probably are in most times, at certain moments in time, you do see some divisions here in terms of these points of view. This is one of those. So I think, at least for some countries in the Gulf, there's zero appetite, and I think I'm still being polite saying it in that way, to be locked into a situation whereby Iran basically holds the keys to their economies, and that's essentially what it would be. If Iran decides one day you're not a friendly country, we're done.
Yeah.
Nobody wants that. The UAE has been particularly vocal on this over the last few days. In particular, you're hearing it from all kinds of diplomats up and down, that this is not okay. We are not willing to countenance any situation in which anybody, not Iran, not anybody, claims control of this. So I mean, this is what's interesting. Even the Omanis, who are obviously Iran's kind of buddies in the region,
Yeah.
it's not that they've been more diplomatic about this, in the sense that they said, look, yes, we are talking to Iran. That's been clear. They both announced this in terms of how to maybe see a future for this waterway. But even the Omanis came out and said, this is to charge people to transit this waterway is not really something that we can do. I don't think the Omanis would necessarily be on board with this.
Yeah.
If this was something that Iran could get kind of broader buy-in from several countries in the Gulf, and that's a very, very big if, we might see some kind of future
Yeah.
for such an idea. But as of now, I'm still pretty skeptical.
And just in general, if you could, you are watching this, you are studying this. What is the picture on the ground in the Strait of Hormuz? Are there mines, as the Iranians say? Is that a bluff? Are there Iranian gunboats patrolling? Speedboats, they're fast boats. Are there Iranian submarines in that area watching out for any American ships or any other interlopers? Or is it not clear what is happening there now?
Yeah, I'm going to be totally clear. I'm going to be honest with you. It's not totally clear, but the questions you ask are really fascinating. The reason I smiled is because these are questions that many people have. This idea of mines, I mean, no one's really going to go and test it out for themselves, right? I
Yeah.
think over the last couple of days, I think it was yesterday or the day before, the Sepah came out themselves. The IRGC came out themselves with this map, and they made it clear and said, look, for any friendly ships who want to pass the Strait of Hormuz, we kindly suggest that you use these two particular routes, which, surprise, surprise, are basically hugging the Iranian
Iranian.
coastline. Yeah, but and do not use the lanes that are next to the Omanis because it's unsafe. Now, we have heard from all kinds of officials and MPs over this last period that there might be mines, or there have been threats that Iran could be releasing mines from the coast into the Strait of Hormuz. So the threat is there, and to be honest, the risk is huge regardless of these mines. And I think that's the concern here, that no one's really aware. The gunboats, those are for sure there. We have seen that. We have seen evidence of that. We have heard evidence of that through intercoms and what we've been receiving from different ship owners. So the gunboats are there. This is a very big part of the way Iran handles its navy, essentially, or any kind of naval dealings in these waters. But when it comes to the mines, it's just unclear. And I think that lack of clarity is really helping Iran's case. People simply do not. We're talking about tankers with incredible volumes of critical commodities. So this is really expensive kit that we're talking about.
Yeah.
And insurers, the thing that has closed the Strait of Hormuz more than Iran is the risk. And this is essentially it. No one wants to basically back these vessels or provide the insurance for them to go through simply because it's too expensive. The risk is too high.
Well, great. Thank you so much. I really appreciate this. Nader Itayim of Argus, a research and news outlet dedicated to commodities and oil and energy. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you so much, Borzu. Likewise.
This is Borzu Dergahi. This is the Badlands Podcast. Please subscribe at borzu.substack.com. Thanks for listening or watching.